has been. And that's why you have seen missions going from here to the IMF, from the IMF to here, and we'll be going back and forth for a long time, because some of the issues that we have had to work through are just tough, almost solidified issues that now have to be pried out.
And you reject the view of some of the critics that some of the reasons for the delay has been due to our lack of technical expertise, that we have not had the best expertise at our disposal. We have not had the best negotiating teams, and therefore...
No, that's not true.
That's not true.
That's not true. The team that has been negotiating with the fund has been pretty much the same team that has been there before. The numbers crunchers, the people who provide the technical support, has been pretty much there. I think there are one or two persons who are no longer there, but we have brought in some additional persons, some new persons who have been part of the team. It is just that the numbers have been hard to crunch, because the reality that we have to confront. It's one thing to just look at it and just, just like a surgeon going into the operating theater, say, no, this is what we have to do. But beyond that, you have to look at the consequences of that, the impact of that, because not all of the consequences of that are within your control. Okay. And then you have to look to see now how you're going to manage this situation. And therefore, a lot of the IMF negotiations and the preparation for the IMF program has been what if, and if what if, what do we do?
Let's take a break at this point. Critical issues, consequences of an IMF agreement, how that will affect you, how that will affect your budget. These are the critical issues that we're having with the Prime Minister in this conversation. The Prime Minister will address the matter of the upcoming IMF agreement. Stay tuned. We take our first break. A conversation with the Prime Minister, that is what we are having. We're looking at issues relating to the economy, more particularly issues relating to the upcoming agreement with the International Monetary Fund, an agreement that will have implications, consequences for the lives of all of us, for the country. It's therefore important for us to know what is coming and how we can prepare ourselves. The Prime Minister has said he will accept any questions, tough questions, and we are putting those questions to him. Prime Minister, you had mentioned the matter of consequences before we took the break, and people hear about fiscal deficit and compression of the fiscal deficit, and they don't quite understand the implications of that and how that relates to their everyday life.
And it's important that they do.
Yes.
It's very important that they do. What are those consequences? Central to the IMF program are performance targets that we will have to meet. And those performance targets are going to have to be locked in. Mm-hmm. And I stress locked in because we always set performance targets. Every year governments go to the Parliament and they outline what the targets are for that year. They will even tell you what the targets are for the medium term. Mm-hmm. And when they don't meet those targets, then they simply come to Parliament and say, well, look, we had expected to achieve this, we didn't achieve this, this is the reason why, therefore the revised target is X. We will not have that luxury going forward, and which is why we have had to spend so much time with the IMF working out what is doable and what is palatable. And we have had to be saying to the IMF, even when the IMF is saying we need you to become more aggressive, we have had to be saying, no, look, the country has to endure this thing. But what are those performance targets? Firstly, we're going to have to get that deficit down, and therefore over the medium term, we are projecting to get that deficit down to a balanced budget over the medium term.
But within the next year?
Well, let me explain.
Yeah, where are we moving the deficit?
We're going to have to trend that down. In other words, the deficit is not going to be allowed to go above what it is this year, which means that you're going to have to align your expenditure with your revenues. What does that mean?
How drastic an alignment will we have in the first year?
In the first year, it is going to be significant.
Significant in the first year?
But it is going to be continued over the medium term with some expectation that we will see a return to GDP growth, so that some of the adjustments that would normally be necessary at that stage would be covered by growth. But we're going to have to contain our expenditure. We're going to have to increase our revenues, which means that we're going to have to find new taxes that can be collected.
Within the next financial year?
Almost immediately.
Almost immediately?
Almost immediately.
Almost immediately upon the signing of an agreement?
Yes, almost
new
immediately.
Taxes?
Yes, because this year, for example, up to the end of October, our revenues were running 17.8 billion below projection.
Precisely.
We have tried to contain our expenditure. So we have actually tightened expenditure to the point where our expenditure is running 7 billion behind projection. But then that still leaves you with a gap of $10 billion that has to be addressed. You no longer have the ability, the facility to go to the market and say, lend me an extra 10 billion. We're going to have to start closing that gap in this fiscal year.
In this fiscal year?
This fiscal year.
So more taxes?
More taxes will have to come. We'll have to look to see where our sources of taxes
but can the poor take any more, Prime Minister? Can the poor take any more taxes?
The key thing in this is that we have to try to spread that burden as much as possible, spread it across.
The suggestion has been made, Prime Minister, that the earnings of people like me and others who have money on treasury bill, that those should be taxed.
That has to be addressed. If you look at,
so it is likely that will be dealt with.
If you look at your expenditure side, your two biggest items are your interest costs on debt, which amounts to about 175 billion, and your wages and salaries, which amount to another 125 billion. So between those two, you're talking about 300 billion for those two big ticket items out of a total budget of 561. We're doing everything possible to tighten the expenditure on the wages side. You know that we have had to say to the workers, look, we can't pay the 7% because things are just tough. We have set up the Public Sector Transformation Unit, which is looking to see how can we save, not just in terms of wages, but on the cost of running government. But we're going to have to address the cost of interest as well. That's very much part of the program.
No, I mean taxing people who have treasury.
That was one way of
getting some money,
dealing with it. The problem with that is that with that approach, is that you have no guarantee that it won't just simply find its way in terms of higher interest charges. And therefore you have to address the whole question of I mean, if I'm charging you X% for lending you money now, and you decide to tax that X%, then next time you want money from me to borrow, I simply say, well, X plus Y. And they simply put it back into the market.
So
we're taking a broader approach.
It's not that you are afraid to touch the big people in the society.
No,
not that you are exempting the big people, putting all the pressure on the poor.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Central to the program is bringing down interest rates. And in bringing down interest rates, we have to look at the profile of our debt, because our debt consists of a whole range of instruments. The fact of the matter is that we are paying the highest interest rate in the world. We are paying for money that we have borrowed on some portions of that debt portfolio. We are paying as high as 24%. There's nowhere else in the world that anybody is paying 24% for money. But we have a commitment to honor our obligations. It is within that sort of broad commitment that we have been in touch with the market. We are negotiating how can we come together, because this is not something that can be done simply by a government executive decision or by legislation. How can we work with the market to say, no, look, we both have an investment, you and the government, in seeing to it that this economy can come out of the slump it is in and can be put back on a path of growth. How can we work together?
So you're putting back on the table the liquidity management program that the cabinet had taken a decision not to pursue.
The cabinet had taken a decision not to pursue a particular strategy that had been put forward, because we felt that it would not be market friendly and therefore would not get the kind of support that we felt any such approach needs.
But it could have redesigned it.
In a sense,
what we're doing now.
In a sense, that's what we have done. In a sense.
And
in that regard, we have got significant assistance from the International Monetary Fund, from the multilaterals, the IDB. We have got significant assistance from the key players in the financial sector itself.
And IMF supports this strategy.
We are there. We are pretty much there.
And also the fact that we have now had the 3 downgrades. So our worst fears having come through, there is less of an intimidation to go that route of liquidity management. Is that your smile suggests that I'm onto something?
I follow your reasoning. But the fact of the matter is that we still have to be concerned. We can't take the market for granted. We can't just proceed and say, well, to help